The mighty 24th day, January 2024. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford. Excuse me. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. 4406. Hope you're having a great day. A great day. We got funny crows down here. What's the nuclear industry got to say today? I hear you, Stingray. Got kind of an epiphany today. Like heart attacks are accelerated massively. It's one of the biggest issues with nuclear is heart attacks and lung problems, respiratory problems. And it destroys your chromosomes, your DNA, and destroys your future generations and yourself, your current generations. It does this exponentially to the species. It's literally like throwing the species in a black hole. It's the equivalent to putting nuclear on your planet. You're under assault. It's the radiation's in your body. It's like nuclear weapons going off every second in your body. Each atom pulsing energy like a nuclear bomb detonating every second. Consider clicking around a little tiny bit. If that's your thing, if that's your cup of tea. You have to treat nuclear power plants as if it's a meteorite coming at your planet, and you're trying to defend against it with paper airplanes. The nuclear industry literally acts like they're an alien species. They hate all 8 million species in humanity for some reason. I don't understand the contempt for dinosaur. Complete dinosaur. This is your typical nuclear industry right there. Brain capacity, typical nuclear, are completely disconnected. And their legacy is just extinction event for all species. You can't keep up with the body count. You really can't. I mean, they picked up 60 million one-ton bags, according to some. We say 30 million. It sounds a bit better, but put it into perspective what 30 million one-ton bags is. It's equal to 30 million one-ton pickup trucks, bumper to bumper, wrapped around your entire planet. This is just from one accident. And this was only 3% of the land that they scratched the surface of. You can't claw back the radioactive fallout that covers the entire planet. And so what you end up doing is you're stacking up bodies that you can't keep track of. And just each of these nuclear power plants, each one, that's reactor 3 to your left, reactor 4 to your right, each one of them is worse than all nuclear meltdowns in history. But here we got South Korea, which is now a pro-nuclear administration, coming out and saying that Fukushima multiple nuclear meltdowns is equal to 3 grams of sugar. Saying that the only thing, this is a professor of nuclear and quantum engineering that are teaching our children's in the universities, saying that the animosity equivalent is only equal to 3 grams of sugar, but why did you pick up 30 million one-ton bags? Why did the media pretend that they were in reactor 4 fuel pool when it doesn't even exist? Why was there 865,000 extra cancers in the first year? These are not questions journalists are going to ask or answer. They're too busy stabbing you and your loved ones and every generation for 80 years in the throat. That's the only thing they're good at. The buildings are actually destroyed. They put covers over it and then claim that they got the fuel out of the pool. But the covers can't physically touch the destroyed reactors. It's hard to understand because there's so many bodies in the way. I get that. I understand that. I totally agree with that. This is the radioactive fallout based on France's initial 1,000,000 to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. We've never heard of nothing like this in history of humans. And everybody's pretending that it didn't happen? Every academic is what I mean by that. Every nuclear scientist on the planet, and I mean every nuclear scientist on the entire planet, when they seen that right there, when they seen Reactor 4, they knew the fuel pools were gone. They knew the reactor cores were gone, and even today they're denying it. When every nuclear academic on the planet seen these journalists claiming that they were in the fuel pools, they knew every one of them was lying. And then everybody at CNN and ABC Australia and BBC and CBS studios knew that they weren't in the fuel pools. Every single person in those medias absolutely unequivocally knew that they weren't in the buildings, that the buildings were completely gone, and decided to hide it on you. Everybody decided to hide it on you. How come? Because it's like a banana? Like walking in sunshine or flying on an airplane? Because I can assure you it's not. I can assure you 100% is not. We have a poll tonight. Should nuclear power scientists be on trial for crimes against humanity and destroying the biosphere? You notice I only got 18 votes with 22 likes, which is the opposite of what we get, right? They're monitoring you in real time. They hate your guts. Justin Trudeau is a narcissistic tyrant, and the Canadian High Courts just proved it. Did you know that? In a classic example of better later than never, a federal court in Canada ruled on yesterday, that the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, invoking the Emergency Act, which Americans know as martial law, in 2022, to crush protesters, the largest and most peaceful protest in Canadian history, was reasonable, unjustified, and violated the fundamental freedoms set out in the Canadian Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And every prime minister, every president worldwide does the same thing. Their job is not to serve your countries. Their job is to make sure they destroy your country. Westminster must end its nuclear obsession as Hinkley Point C cost spirals. Of course, Hinkley Point is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. The net zero energy spokesperson, David Dugan, that creature right there, said only clean renewable energy could be relied upon to bring down the bills for the consumers. And that the latest delay demonstrates that the Westminster's nuclear obsession will do nothing to help people battling the high cost of living. It's time to be grown up about nuclear power in Scotland. Scotland is, the pro-nuclear in Scotland are just, they're like the pro-nuclear in Australia and the United Kingdom. They're really the worst of the worst that we see in the nuclear industries, aren't they? So they show you these pictures, and they do this constantly. You see, if you're around regularly, you'll see this. They'll show you this type of picture, but when you get a above picture, what do you see in the background? As far as you can see, farms. Why is almost every single nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? And why are the farms always right up tight to the nuclear plant itself? Do you think that's an accident? Because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day. So quite the discrepancy between the picture they show you and the picture that it actually looks like, right? Meanwhile, in Scotland, the SNP refuses point blank to have a grown-up discussion on building on Scotland's excellent track record. Excellent track record. of running nuclear power stations for more than 50 years. Well, Scotland's not running it. By way of his quasi-ban on new zero-carbon nuclear. New zero-carbon nuclear. The one they're building now in the United Kingdom is the biggest project in human history. It's using the most precious metals of any place in human history. 90% of it, if anybody's alive when they're finished, in 60 years or something, is what I mean by that. 90% of that site will go into a nuclear waste site because of neutron bombardments and beta rays and gamma shines. And all of these places, as I just showed you, surrounded by farms. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into the farms. I forgot to slurp extra loud for everybody. I apologize. I'll get it right the next time. And the person who wrote this story didn't have the conviction to put their name on it. To develop new stations will not only give us credibility, which the person who wrote the story doesn't get because they wouldn't put their name on it, sustainable and completely carbon-free. Like, how can you suggest a large nuclear power plant dependent upon 2 gas, oil, and coal plants somehow to be carbon-free? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? But would provide energy security and high-quality, well-paid, long-term jobs that they're going to need the money to liquidate their assets later because of all the diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that their loved ones are going to have from these disease factories. It's time for a change and for the SNP to abandon the anti-nuclear scared crow and for all. Scots deserve better than blind ideology. Yeah, blind, like the guy who won't put his name on his article. I not only put my name on it, I put my phone number out there. I don't hide away from nobody. Honesty doesn't need to hide. Just cowards, liars, like the author of that last article. Egypt begins construction of the nation's first nuclear plant. They must have a lot of farmland down there. The construction of the nuclear plant marks Egypt's first nuclear plant and the second one constructed in Africa. I'm not laughing at Africa. I'm laughing at the Kohlberg nuclear power plant in Africa. Built on multiple fault lines with unbelievable amount of small quakes, which stresses all the cement and the steel, which is brittle from decades and decades of neutron bombardment. And these are high-pressure reactors. Presently, the only active plant in South Africa is 30 kilometers north of Cape Town. Don't worry, it'll radiate the rest of your country. Nothing is sacred. Nothing is safe from the degenerate nuclear. Let's keep rolling. It contributes in providing safe and cheap. What part of cheap is it? Does anybody know of a cheap nuclear power plant? I can't name a single cheap nuclear power plant. I can't name a plant that doesn't need endless subsidies. I can't name a single plant that doesn't destroy the communities and the ecosystem and the biosphere. The biosphere is all the ecosystem, the entire habitable ecosystem of all the species. That's what nuclear is really good at. It's good at destroying it. My biggest fear is we discover another planet with 8 million species on it. And the first thing we do is we go there and put a nuclear power plant on it and set it on the timer for self-destruction of the species with the radioactive fallout. I'm drinking my tea tonight because it's so cold here. It's hard to comprehend how actual cold it is. Got down to minus 30 this morning. And power went out at 8 a.m. So I went out, started up the generator. By the time I come back in the house, there was no way I was taking the hat off my head. My goodness, that was so cold. One of my balls is still sucked up into the cavity. Idaho residents still seeing impacts of decades-old nuclear test fallout. The fallout never goes away. It'll be here long past the human experience. That's the thing about nuclear. that nobody seems, not obviously not the people that are following these presentations, but the rest of the planet has no concept of the evil, including a lot of the investors have no concept. We're educating them because if there's no other way to explain the decrease in nuclear over the last 12 years. The fight isn't over. Idaho downwinders persist after Congress cuts compensation for the victims. The expansion would have broadened the geographic downwind eligibility to include Idaho, Montana, Colorado, New Mexico, Guam, Utah, Nevada, Arizona would have been entitled to compensation. If you work at Hanford Nuclear Power Plant for a single 8-hour shift in 1947 or 1957 or 1952 or 1963 or any time in the last 80 years, 85 years, if you worked there for a single one shift, 8-hour shift, you don't even have to work there. You just had to be there and pick up something and then got fired. And you got sick. You don't have to prove you got sick at Hanford. You just have to be sick all these years later, and you're entitled to a pension or a payout and medical help for the rest of your life. And if you're the family of those victims, you're also entitled to that too. Because nuclear is like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine, Dana. Long-lived state in radioactive sodium discovered at the facility for the rare isotope beam. There we go. This is such an insane story. Long-lived state in radioactive sodium discovered at the facilities for the rare isotope beam. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this story. So, what is the half-life of sodium-32? It's 13.2 milliseconds. 13.2 milliseconds. It's quicker than I can snap my fingers. 13.2 milliseconds. Let me show you something of how anal this industry actually is. The research involved 66 participants from 20 universities and national laboratories, including the ever relentless degenerates at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, the Florida State University, the Mississippi State University, the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. This is a neutron-rich nucleoid. And funding was provided by the Department of Energy, the Office of Science, the Office of Nuclear Physics, the Department of Energy National Nuclear Security Administration, and the Stewardship Science Academic Alliance Program. Support was also provided by the U.S. National Science Foundation and the Major Research Instrumentation Program. This research used resources at the Facility for the Rare Isotope Beam, the Department of Energy Official of Science Users Facilities. That's pretty impressive for an isotope that only lasts 13.2 milliseconds, which is quicker than you can blink your eye. So you get how evil this industry actually is, and how much of your resources are just pissed on this industry constantly everywhere. China does the same thing. India does the same thing. Pakistan, scumbag Israel, degenerate Canada. All of them are doing the exact same thing with the same isotope, looking for the same result. And then they'll have parties. They'll get awards. They'll have galas. They'll all wear tuxedos, and they'll tell each other how much better they are than everybody else. I'll smoke fine cigars. And you know how much this benefits you? It doesn't. Ultimately, the destruction of your planet or another planet. is the enemy of humanity. Imagine a drone the size of a slice of bread may allow a closer look inside the damaged Fukushima nuclear power plant. Mari Yamaguchi. We all know Mari Yamaguchi. Let me show you some of her finer work. Mari Yamaguchi. Gucci Mariyami. Let me go backwards. Bear with me, it's worded. The hard thing about nuclear is I'm not allowed to have a Freudian slip. I can't. It's not like a normal conversation. You're not even allowed to. You can't make a single mistake to chop it up and eventually string it together and then use that to attack you. Mari Yamaguchi. In 2013, Mari Yamaguchi said the tanks at the crippled plant leaked highly radioactive water. 2013, in August. And you had 1,000 tanks in August of 2013. Not 2014, not 2015, not 2016, or 2017, or 2018, or 2019, 2020, 2021, not 2022 or 23, not 2024, but in August of 2013. They had 1,000 tanks. That's quite interesting. Why did they have 1,000 tanks way back then? What was the rush? You had 11 years before you got to this point. You didn't need to build them all at one time, did you? If what they tell you is true. And the official story is that out of all the nuclear meltdowns, you got 4 melted reactors and 8 fuel pools that melted down. We've never seen anything like that in our history. Combined, does not even exist in that capacity. And he said they're spraying 130 tons a day on 4 reactors. A garden hose sprays 140 tons a day, like a 3/8-inch typical garden hose that basically anybody with a garden will have. And so you got to split a garden hose 4 ways, and then each one of them is what they spray on a 9,000 degree Fahrenheit nuclear meltdown. It's equivalent to a crow pissing on a nuclear meltdown all day. Mari Yamaguchi, 2013, with 1,000 steel tanks. 2014, March the 10th, radioactive water still troubles Japanese Mari Yamaguchi. They had 1,200 tanks. 1,200. You know how many they got today, right? 1,000. In 2017, Mari Yamaguchi has 900 large tanks. Try walking with both of your feet flat on the ground. And send me a video. I want to see it. I tried it. It can't be done as far as I know. Even if you got rollerblades on or ice skates on, it can't be done. Like that. And look at his hands. It's like he got a stick up his... And they're walking on steel plates that are welded together and then brought in with cranes and laid down because of all the pellets that are in the ground from the detonations. But as far as I can tell, that's photoshopped. That's not actual. Now, there's people goes there, homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, immigrants who don't speak the language, not nuclear scientists. How many times have you seen Miko Kaku or any other nuclear scientist? Hey, we're here at the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. Me and my buddy Tepco. Fukushima will have to dump the radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean 2019. In the third, this line my fingers on at the beginning, 1,000 tanks at the Fukushima Daiichi. And the author of that story, by the way, is a piece of shit. We've covered too many times to count. 2021, the Associated Press, Mari Yamaguchi. Stored in 1,000 tanks. 2000, Mari Yamaguchi. 23, Mari Yamaguchi. 2023, water is used to cool the reactors accumulated in 1,000 tanks. Mari Yamaguchi. Mari Yamaguchi. Water at over a sievert per hour per liter. 2.2 sieverts. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may be still entering the Pacific Ocean. We know that the Riva system didn't work, the Siri system didn't work, the Curie system didn't work, the ELP system didn't work in 2014, late 2014, which is a year after they had 1,000 tanks. If you fill up the tanks, now it was actually 2.2 sieverts of beta. And if you go to my playlist and look up the tanks, you'll see all that information and then more beyond you can ever imagine. I provide more documentation than all of them put together for some reason. And I'm just a friggin' nobody. If I can do it, how come they can't? This is the great water filtration. So they're claiming that only ELPs, only tritium, 3H. They won't even call it what it is, 3H. If it was tritium, you would call it 3H. Because there's natural tritium, right? But the nuclears make tritium 3H, which is a nasty isotope with a 120-year lifespan. So they're in Futaba town. So they're going to send in the robots. Like you got to look at the size of Buddy's feet. It's hard to believe we're having this conversation. It's hard to believe that we can have this conversation. They're going to send the robots into a nuclear meltdown. That's Reactor 4. They already claimed they got the fuel that'll pull that one. Electronics don't work in there. If electronics work in there, they wouldn't send in a robot. They would just take a camera, put it on a stick, and stick it in there, right? They wouldn't go through this nonsense. And then a drone the size of a slice of bread, and they're going to try to figure out why it blew up by doing that. So you're going to go look at the carcass, the stump, where the building is actually gone. Let me show you what the building, some of the buildings look like. That's Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 to your left. Like, these buildings were destroyed. There's nuclear meltdowns where they burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Sending in a robot, even if it does work, it's not going to give you or glean anything. It's like, and all the media today is screeching that story every direction you look. A drone the size of a piece of shit is Japan's newest hope to get clear footage of one of the reactors 13 years later. Just get a fucking Jap, tie some rope on his feet, hang him from a crane, and just lower him down. They got a few homeless left there, don't they? Hope to get cleaner footage of one of the reactors. Clearer footage, cleaner footage. 4 drones are ready to be sent in to die at the number 1 reactor for 5-minute intervals, because that's all the batteries last. Partly due to short batteries, but actually due to the fact that they'll die. You won't be able to get them back. So if you send a robot of any type in there, and when it comes out, you touches it, you die. If you put it in a room where there's a bunch of people, they die that day. The data will be used in the investigation of how exactly the meltdown occurred. Well, they had a tsunami, moron. They lost power, dipstick. The buildings were flooded with a tsunami at 400 miles per hour. Shit for brains. Stop stalling and get on top of a fucking skyscraper and jump on a camera and stream it onto YouTube for us, for Christ's sakes. Do everybody a favor. The company, which is not supposed to exist, intends to send the drones inside the primary containment vessel of the number 1 reactor. There is no containment. Like, what are you talking about? There is no containment to number 1 reactor, or a number 2 reactor, or a number 3 or number 4. And the International Atomic... The only reason they're saying it is because the International Atomic Energy Agency, which shouldn't exist, which is just a corporation on a piece of paper, which has no sovereignty, it's not a regulatory agency. There's enough scumbags in the nuclear industry to go around is about the only thing that we know for sure. There is no limit on the amount of scumbags we got in nuclear. I don't know how they can look anybody in the face. I would imagine none of them got mirrors in their houses. I don't know why it's not a crime to be a mass murderer. U.S. media only mentions report about the melt-through at reactor number 1. The melt-through of the containment vessel at number 1. Not at number 2, number 3. What about number 4, you piece of shit? Up to 1 million sieverts outside of number 1. 3 is a lethal dose to a human. Let me see, 100 sieverts is a lethal dose if you run past it as fast as you can. You die 20 minutes later in that environment. 1,000 sieverts, if you're 1,000 feet away and you peek around the corner of the building and you pull your head back, you died. 1 million sieverts, there's no way to survive it. So what does it mean, though? I mean, there's so much evidence. Video believed to show parts of the internal structure of Unit 1 containment vessel. Again, this is believed. It's not. You can't send anything in there. They're trying to send in drones today. You can't do it. Impossible that the bulk of melted fuel is in Unit 1 containment. We know there was an explosion. We know it melted down. It melted down in 50 minutes. The NRC, the International Atomic Energy, everybody agrees with that. But they just, on July the 13th, 2023, last year, the whole narrative changed. Now all of a sudden there's no nuclear meltdown. Nothing got out. Whatever got out is equal to 3 grams of sugar. Everything else is in 1,000 tanks. Claiming there's 900 tons of highly radioactive melted nuclear fuel inside the 3 damaged reactors. Well, they're talking about reactor 1, 2, and 3, right? Here's reactor 4. There is no reactor. Now, the reactor, they were changing fuel, so there's 2/3 of the reactor core was in the reactor. The fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. There's no top of the buildings. The fuel pools each had around 5 reactor cores. You gotta wake up. You gotta fight back, for goodness sakes. Critics say the 30-year cleanup target set by the government and TEPCO for Fukushima Daiichi is overly optimistic. Critics would say that reactor 4 fuel pools and reactor cores are gone. They wouldn't make narratives like this. You can't even decommission a normal closed reactor in 30 or 40 years. You can't decommission something that's melted down on top of that. TEPCO said it's going to do a test trial to remove a small amount of the melted debris in the number 2 reactor by the end of March after a nearly 2-year delay. So now they're claiming number 2 reactor containment is intact. which we know is not. Spent fuel removal from the Unit 1 reactor cooling pools is set to start in 2027. There is no spent fuel pools in Reactor 1, no spent fuel pools in Reactor 2, there's no spent fuel pools in Reactor 3, and there's no spent fuel pools in Reactor 4. This is obviously cooked up by the International Atomic Energy Agency, otherwise they wouldn't make these types of remarks, right? Once all the spent fuel is removed, melted debris will be taken out in 2031. The building burnt constantly for days. Reactor 2 in particular, that went China syndrome. That went deep down into the earth. We're still burning at around 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. It hit the water tables at one point, and it split the earth open in multiple places. The steam coming out of the ground enveloped the entire site, where they had to abandon the entire site for multiple times for extended periods. There's no way to contain it. There's hydrovolcanic explosions from the expansion of water, because water vaporizes and expands at around 1,200 cubic feet per millisecond, per liter rather, in a millisecond. Snake-like robot. The only thing snake-like is TEPCO in the pro-nuclear community. It wasn't a hydrogen blast. The hydrogen blast is caused by the fuel pool reactor cores melting down. It's caused by the zirconium cladding being exposed to oxygen. Once it's exposed to oxygen, it immediately sets fire, and it burns at 1,800 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. That ignites the plutonium uranium pellets. They burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures right away. That evaporates the water immediately, and the fuel pool and everything else ignites. Once you get a liquid mass at these temperatures, that will tunnel its way deep into the earth, unless it detonates, like Reactor 3. Here's Reactor 3. So, of course, they got the fuel pool at the pool in Reactor 3, but the fuel pool is at the... Let me go back and show you this stuff, because... generally, I show it at the beginning of every show, but it's so time-consuming to always do that. Sometimes I try to cut a few corners, and that doesn't work, does it? Because then I still have to go back and show it to you. So let's do that. What do we got here? That's Reactor 3. Let me go over to the... Let me change. That's not what we want. What's going on here? Oh. Let's do this again. Detonation. I'm going to zoom right in. I'll center that for you in a second. So that's a reactor building right there. This is 190 feet tall, 65 meters tall. It's 50 meters wide, 150 feet wide. It's a 19-story building. These are huge buildings. So that one of those buildings is an exact replica of that, a boiling water reactor, which is number 3 reactor, detonates. I'm going to move it framing. And you can see the big chunks up there. I'm going to back up a little tiny bit. Now watch the big chunks. Back up even more, Dana. Watch the big chunks falling down. You see the big black stuff falling down? I'm sorry, let me slow it down. In fact, let me slow it down 50%. Now you see the big pieces falling back down. They're huge chunks. They're falling very quick compared to the rest of them, especially over there. That's the reactor core and the fuel pools. That's your reactor core. Now do you hit it? Let's do that again. And at the top of it, you'll see heavy stuff at the top of it, lifting separate from the gaseous plume of radiation itself. And that stuff you're going to see falling back down at a very high rate of speed. Now I'm slowed right down, but the plume is still going up, but this heavy material is falling back down. And that's that building right there to your left. That's Reactor 3. Reactor 4, they refuse to acknowledge Reactor 4 looks like that, and they refuse to acknowledge Reactor 3 looks like that. They refuse to acknowledge Reactor 1 actually detonated. The containment can't survive it. They built a Kevlar sarcophagus to hide it from you. And that this piece right here is the bottom piece right there. To give you some context, you can see Buddy stood up right there, one of the homeless people. You see everything is a steel deck. Now this is built off-site. Then he brought it in, assembled it around Reactor 3. But the explosion of Reactor 3 was like Reactor 2. The fuel pool was immediately vaporized. It was atomized in aerosol. That was it there. So let me zoom in on that so you can actually see it. I'll center it for you. Let me get my big head out of the way. Let me do that again. Let me do it again. See the explosion is amazing, isn't it? That's Reactor 3. Or Reactor 1 exploding, rather. Sorry, let me go backwards. So Reactor 2 is also had the same attributes. It's gone. Reactor 1, they put this containment around it for 5 years to hide it from you. And now they're claiming that they're going to go in there. Now, when you put a containment like this, you put a containment like that, they left it there for 5 years. So the radiation is just constantly hemorrhaging out of these melted reactors. And so if you take a square foot of this stuff and put it in McDonald's, everybody walks in it for 1,000 years will die within 20 minutes. Just hide it in the ceiling somewhere, right? The nuclear industry had was using some equipment that was highly radioactive for measurements, right? It has a huge, not a huge, but a small chunk of cesium, raw cesium. And the nuclear industry, they were building this apartment building, and the nuclear industry put a piece of it in the wall, and on that floor, multiple people were dying of leukemia. In one family, there was like 5 members died of leukemia within a 2-year period. And somebody happened to decide to check for radiation because this had all the attributes of radiation. And what they found was somebody had put a raw piece of the equipment that would use for special measurements in the wall and then sealed it in with gyprock. And it was only like the kid that survived, the little kid, but he suffered severe cancer too, right? If you take what they done to 800 pregnant women in the United States in the 60s, where they gave the pregnant women radioactive drinks and radioactive shots, pregnant women. They told the women it was vitamin shots, rather. And then the babies that were aborted or the babies that died, when the funeral was over, they went in that night, dug up the babies, took them back to Los Alamos and Savannah River sites and places like this, and ashed the bodies. And that's what they call incinerating the bodies. And then they sniffed the air for the isotopes. And they carried out the experiment for many, many decades. Many, many victims. So Reactor 3 and 4 doesn't exist, but yet they claim they got all the fuel out of the pool. Reactor, and there was no explosions, no meltdown. Come on, right? But they don't show you that picture when they say it. And then the same thing with Reactor 3. They claimed they got all, on the 10th anniversary 2 years ago, 2021, they claimed they got all the fuel out of that pool. And there's only a stump left. The poles are at the very top of the building. So are the reactor cores. And then the media in Reactor, they did the same thing for Reactor 3, but in 2013, we're pretending that they got all the fuel out of the pool of Reactor 4. This is official pictures. Let me play the video because it's unbelievable.
Flag standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So Celia Vega is actually in the press club at the White House. She makes $1 million a year. BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes actually done the exact same video for Reactor 3. CBS said Dorn is a senator's son. So why go through all that trouble? Why pretend they're in a building that don't exist? Like, what could possibly be the catalyst that all the world's media is pretending they're in buildings that don't exist? Why would you do something like that? What could possibly motivate you to do something like that? Well, the radioactive fallout covers the entire planet. And most of the models are 20 to 30 days. This is an extinction event. And we launched research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia, where there's 27,000 islands. And that's what we discovered. Fukushima is an extinction event due to the radioactive fallout. The species have been exterminated. The species to your right no longer exist due to perpetual, endless radioactive fallout that can never come back. All nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging radiation into your environment from the fuel pools. All of them. Every nuclear power plant out there in a 24-hour period can make a plume like that. And you can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. It wipes out the bases of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestration chain in increments so tiny you can't perceive it. But as you look at it and watch it, you'll see the denigration within a decade or two of all the species. And that's what we're seeing. A complete extinction event. Now, I've done the research expeditions for 6 years. Under siege, under attack the entire time. And couldn't defend myself. I was on the ocean 4 to 5 months a year doing the species counts. And the reason we done it for 6 years is because after the first year we discovered the species were exterminated. You had to go and see if they recovered. And so because they didn't recover, it can only mean one thing, is we sterilized the ocean, the super life itself. And so normally you would describe a glass of salt water as 1 billion creatures. So in a glass of salt water, there's 1 billion creatures, and 75 to 100 million of them would be the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis of the carbon sequestration chain. And so that's at the surface. Once you kill that off, everything else will eventually wither and die. And so the biggest mammals on the planet are dependent upon the phytoplankton. A large number of the species of birds are dependent upon the phytoplankton. Like the Cassiniaclids, the storm petrels. They're dependent upon many other species, or what they call skimmers net, where they eat, that's what they literally eat, the zooplankton and everything else, which are completely dependent upon the phytoplankton. And it's quite interesting because you see them showing up on both spectrums of the food chain from now, emaciated by the millions. And then the big whales, you're seeing mass mortality events for quite a long time for humpback whales, for fin whales, for beak whales, for gray whales. All of them showing up emaciated. telltale signs are in your face. They're blatant. They're literally blatant, and they're in your face. And accepting the truth is the beginning of a future. If you don't accept the truth, there can't be a future, right? My external computer that I use for the chat room and everything, and for the poll is just like 4 days in a row now. It's giving me issues. Should nuclear power scientists be on trial for crimes against humanity after destroying the biosphere? Just bear with me. The biosphere, also known as the ecosystem, is the worldwide sum of all ecosystems, and it can be termed as the zone of life on Earth. It's virtually a closed system with minimal input-output regarding energy. It's an open system. It's all species. It's the whole ecosystem. Without it, nothing can survive. And that's what nuclear is really good at. You can't smell it or see it or hear it or feel it or touch it or taste it. But make no mistake, it's coming for you. Was it worth sacrificing all the species, pretending that it's somehow low? It's low carbon because it kills everything with carbon, which is everything that has replicating cells. Let me keep going. Are they going to sit in a robot? Look, and this is fake pictures, obviously. Can nuclear energy unlock a bright future for Nigeria? Of course it can, stupid. Workers at the atomic weapons establishment where the Trident missiles are maintained staged a 24-hour walkout over 6% pay increase offer. Bless their hearts, eh? The weapons manufacturer. Don't give them a nickel. They're a bunch of bums. But look at this. This is the picture they show you. That's the picture they gave me. I can see a few farmer fields to the right or to the left. And look at the houses close by. Like, it's absurd. Anybody would build a house there. It's absurd that somebody would actually move into these houses. And see the houses on the outskirts? But when you go look up another picture, what do you see in the background? Farms. You look up another picture. Oh, that's right, farms everywhere. Quite a coincidence, isn't it? Total coincidence. That all nuclear plants and all dumps and all nuclear waste sites and all nuclear weapons facilities are surrounded by farms. Total coincidence, Dana. Sizewell C, of course, they won't be surrounded by farms. Oh, that's right, they're surrounded by farms. Inspection finds 4 very low significant violations at Callaway. Well, Callaway is not going to be surrounded by farms. Oh, that's right. Look at the picture they gave you. But look it up yourself. Surrounded by farms. Total coincidence, Dana. Stick with that picture, Dana. Don't look at this picture. Sizewell C opponents appealed to the Supreme Court. So the people that are opposing Sizewell should attack them because they're surrounded by farms and that the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation and you're going to poison the entire country. And if they export it, you'll poison those people too. So Callaway had 4 very low significant violations at the nuclear power plant. Failure to follow maintenance procedure. That's low, is it? Failure to identify and correct inoperable containment instruments. Containment, the pressure vessels. I guess the only thing that's important is you're surrounded by farms and you have fuel pools, right? Safe and delicious. Yummy! Japan Prime Minister eats Fukushima fish. That's desperation, isn't it? As soon as the show was over last night, this showed up. He eats Fukushima seafood. And so what? Does anybody really think he's eating Fukushima seafood in particular? Him and his minions? Look at this. Why would you put that on the internet for last night? Is it supposed to give everybody confidence that the food is somehow safe? You got any idea how stupid that actually is? Get that man a set of braces. He's the prime minister of your country. It's okay for the average folks, but how come he doesn't get them sorted out? He's got the money. Flounder and octopus. Anybody believe that? He's scary looking up close, isn't he? It's hard to believe he's actually human sometimes. Here we go again. Reasserting the role of science, food safety, radionuclides, and 2013, Korea adopted a blanket import on the ban of Japanese fishery products. In 2013, 2 years later. Why did they wait 2 years? Because the next administration, right? Then they blocked it. But the original administration, when it happened, was like, oh yeah, ship the food, all the food here you want. The next administration, like in horror, banned the food. At what point do we take our planet back, I wonder? Japan took its case to the World Trade Organization, which is UN, which has no sovereignty over any country, let alone Japan. Radionuclides, also known as the Fukushima case, Japan challenged Korea's blanket import ban on the fishery products. It wasn't just fishery products, it was 14 prefectures. The food was banned by 55 countries, including South Korea, for 10 years. It wasn't just food from the sea. It was the entire prefectures and the coastlines. And it was coastlines in the Japanese Sea, too, on the other side, where the Noto Peninsula is, too. As noted, Japan did not rely on any science-based obligations under the agreement, arguing that the Korea's import ban was not based on sufficient scientific evidence. So they said there was no evidence that the food was contaminated because the reactors didn't melt down and blow up, right? Obviously they didn't melt down, they didn't blow up. Look at them. That's their logic. Because there's nobody's going to challenge that narrative. No one's going to come out and say, well, no, the fuel pools and reactor cores are gone. That's all South Korea had to do. That's it. They win the case, hands down, and the whole world goes, holy shit. Instead, South Korea had to play a political cat and mouse game, avoid telling the truth, and still get the ban. So 2 years later, they overturned World Trade Organization, by the way, tried to compel South Korea to take the food from the nuclear wasteland. Japan established a tolerance level of a food of 100 becquerels per kilogram. It was 0.1 becquerels a kilogram pre-Fukushima. There is no tolerable level for anthropogenic man-made radiation because of the bioaccumulation. You're going to bioaccumulate every time you eat it. It's going to sequester in your muscles, your organs, your bones. Your body attacks every atom with white blood cells for the rest of your life. And each atom is pulsing energy at the speed of light, so it has to repair all the damage that does every second. So how much damage can it do to chromosomes, your DNA, and your cells each second, almost at the speed of light when it pulses energy in every direction. Well, a million dead cells and chromosomes and DNA broken. It has to repair all that, and it has to attack the source. It has to do with white blood cells. In order for that to happen, it has to displace, for every white blood cell it's making to attack the million dead, damaged, and destroyed chromosomes and cells and DNAs each second from each isotope, each atom that's in the body. It has to displace a red blood cell, which carries oxygen and nutrition in your body. So eventually what happens is you have so much white blood cells in your body, they call it leukemia. And while you're on that road, your immune system now is compromised, so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless. Completely innocuous and benign. China, Hong Kong, and Macau placed import restrictions on Japanese fishery products because this time Japan had begun discharge, this time, 2023, this that we're referring to in August the 24th, 2023, had begun discharging in 2023. Well, this is pictures of Reactor 3 and 4 in 2013, 10 years before 2023. There's nothing left. Everything is discharged into the atmosphere and the ocean. The water originated from the destroyed power plant and was stored in tanks for over a decade. And later was treated to remove the radionuclides by means of advanced liquid processing systems, the ALPS, to meet the applicable international standards. Let's go look at that. Hello, Mr. Alps. Are you out there? Paging Mr. Alps. Hang on, we got some doozies for that. Where could that be to? I wonder. It's been a while, haven't it, since we covered this one? Been a minute. Oh, there it goes. Bear with me. Bear with me. So the REVA system in 2014, April 21st, 2014, had yet to function. Not reliably, but has yet to function. The REVA system, that was the ELP system, the REVA system in August, 3 years and 6 months later, which is the same as the ELP system, was unused and kept out of operation. That they were going to build a bypass operation where they build a wall on the back of the plant, and the water coming down the mountain would gather up and they would pump it directly into the ocean so it didn't run through the site and become contaminated. That didn't work. They were going to build an ice fence, or a fence to stop the radiation. Going to cost $1 billion. And they couldn't build a fence because you can't build a fence. It doesn't, like radiation doesn't work this way. They're going to build an ice wall. Why not build a real wall, though? And you know it can't stop the groundwater because it's an idiot machine. Why would you build an ice wall when you can build a real wall? And if there's gaps there you can't fill in, maybe use ice there. But why would you build an ice wall? Because it was right. The idea was to manipulate you in increments over many months. That this was the solution. That's the solution. Just like the ground pass by operation and the fence and blah 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 blah. The Siri system, the Korean system, are both supposed to separate cesium-137, because that's the propaganda I've been feeding you for 80 years, cesium-137. But cesium-137 is the same size as the uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, the strontium, 1,000 other fission products. And if I take 200 million of those atoms and put it on the head of a needle, I can't see it. So therefore, I can't filter that. But how do I filter, even if I could filter something, how can I filter just cesium and leave all the other isotopes separate. Because you can't. They're all the same size. It can't be done, right? You can't filter something so small you can't see it and then extract everything else from it. You can't do it that way. It doesn't work that way. The water molecules are bigger than the atoms we're talking about. So the only thing you do is contain everything. You can't do that. Bear with me. I'm a sucker for punishment again. Where would I put that till? Should be right there at my fingertips. This headline here, 2 sieverts an hour of better radiation from a single liter of water. And 2000, it's actually 2.2 millisieverts. 2.2 sieverts. Beta. So you just, the water, you can't just have beta in it. It's going to have alphas and neutrons and gammas. So it's going to be 7, 8, 9, 10 sieverts per liter. So if you got 7, 8, 9, 10 sieverts per liter, and you put it in these tanks, you can't build another tank. That's a lethal dose. You can't get back on the site. Even if the tanks were 6 feet thick, lead, you still couldn't put it in the tanks. It's still a lethal dose. You can't walk past the pipes that are carrying the water. You can't walk past the hoses. You can't go near the filtration system. That's why none of this worked. In 2013, they acknowledged that the plant has already released an enormous amount of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from a plethora of hemorrhages from the reactor buildings. And the reactor buildings have no containment. So like the original footage, there is no containment. You can't contain anything. It was already burnt off in the first 6 days. And many, many, many smart people, way smarter than me, acknowledged this. EU Energy Commissioner called Fukushima an apocalypse. That everything is out of control. And that the French, which are nuts anyway, said Japan has lost control and the French will leave the country. There you go. The Swiss embassy evacuated it from Tokyo, 240 kilometers away because of radiation. The energy officials, Tokyo's lost almost all control. Well, there is no control. Everything melted down right away in the first 6 days. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the entire planet. The ultimate catastrophe of the world and the entire planet. South Korea calls Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. That's being awful polite. And 1,000 years from now, the contaminated water will still be hemorrhaging into the Pacific Ocean. It wasn't above a sievert. And if you go into my playlist and you look up Fukushima tanks, I've done entire presentations, 2 to 3 hours at a time, multiple ones, to explain and show you the documentation of my assertions that I'm doing right now. Thank goodness somebody's trying, I guess. Japan had another magnitude 5.1 earthquake off Hokkaido. So you can't trust Japan. Japan had a 6.6 earthquake in 2018. Let me show you what. A 6.6 earthquake. This will blow your mind if you've never seen this stuff before. So when you see a landslide, you know, that's a pretty bad landslide, right? That's crazy. But in 2016 or 2018, Hokkaido had an earthquake that was 6.6. They said. But I've never seen a 6.6 earthquake to drop the payloads of all the mountains in every direction. I never heard tell of nothing like that. That wasn't a 6.6. And this was very close to a nuclear power plant that they got there, by the way. Have you ever seen an earthquake do that before? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill, so to speak? No pun intended. Have you ever seen mountains lose payloads on every side of the mountain for as far as you can see? As far as the eyes can wander in every direction, no matter where you look. They lost the payloads on every side of the mountains. That was actually a 9.7, 9.8 earthquake. About 30 miles away from a nuclear power plant up in Hokkaido. It's the northern end of Japan. And they hid it away from you, didn't they? Because do you remember those pictures? If you've never been here before, do you remember seeing those pictures? If you've never seen these pictures, you've never been here before, give me a thumbs up. Will you give me that? Give me a thumbs up. Is it a crime to want to be thumbs up? But they had a 5.1 earthquake, and so we'll have to follow that because we can't trust Japan. Noto Peninsula earthquake, which is January the 1st. I can't believe we're still covering that. We believe we have a meltdown at the Shika nuclear power plant's fuel pools. And you will too if you watched a lot of these presentations. 8 quake-hit cities and towns in Ishikawa Prefecture are still without water. How come? Entire areas from Suzu City to Shika. Why has Shika got no water? If Shika got no water, we just found out yesterday that Niigata, which is a long way away, had 6,700 homes seriously destroyed through liquefaction. This is the city of Suzu. And why do we only get the pictures of the tsunami damage instead of the 4,500 homes that were destroyed, like the mayor said for the first couple of days, and the media regurgitated for the first couple of days and then shut the frig up for the last 21, 22 days and refused to mention it again? What's going on there, I wonder? Were they restoring nuclear waste up there? Prime Minister Kishida devours stronger steps for recovery of central Japan quake. He wouldn't let the international community go in with rescue dogs. We've never seen nothing like that before. They wouldn't let the Americans go in. They wouldn't let China go in. They wouldn't let India go in there. They wouldn't let any other countries. They want to send specialized teams to rescue people in the first 72 hours, which is the criteria for survival rate. They wouldn't let their own self-defense forces go in. They wouldn't let anybody go in. They didn't clean up and didn't try to remove the landslides that were blocking up the highways. They refused to let anybody go in. And then the only picture that came out of there of the Shika nuclear power plant was taken by a major media allegedly in Japan. That single picture. They didn't take a picture of Shika town. They didn't take a picture of the coastline. Nothing else. Just that one spot. The nuclear power plant. And everything was hunky-dory. And all the other media used that same picture and told that same story. How come? Why is this industry so unbelievably evil in every single thing that it does at every single moment of every single day? Why is it such a demonic and sadistic and evil industry? Why is it exterminating us and our planet and our species? He's going to announce the establishment of a headquarters, which he will lead himself, dedicated to formulating and executing a reconstruction measures in a place where a 3,000 to 4,000 year old fault line just fucking ruptured and dropped community after community after community to the ground. Or raised it up 13 feet in the air and extended the coastline out by 800 feet. Why would you want to rebuild in a place like that for? Where the scientists acknowledge the big one is yet to come, and it's coming because that fault line just ruptured. Last year they had 8,000 small earthquakes. 4 years ago the average was 20 a year. For the last 3 years it was 8,000 a year. Now they had a massive one. Now they're going to go back in and rebuild, are you? Really? Why? There's 150,000 people within 30 miles of Shika nuclear power plant couldn't evacuate. If you had a meltdown, you couldn't get out of the way. If they didn't have a meltdown, why aren't they showing us all kinds of media going in there to confirm it? How come we haven't seen a single picture of the community right alongside of Ishikawa? Yeah, we've seen allegedly a house that has dropped, but that's all we've seen. Well, you know, like in the background, you can see all the telephone poles tilted in. You can see the earth just rose up. They admit that the community of Shika was hit with a 7 at the Japan seismic intensity scale of 7 on the Shindu scale, which is the equivalent of 10 of a 10 on the Richter scale. And that they admit that an upper 5, which is a 6 on Japanese seismic intensity scale, earthquake happened in the basement of the number 1 reactor, not the number 2, not the pump houses, not the administration buildings, but the number 1 reactor itself. How can you have a massive earthquake in the basement of a building, done no damage, spill some water into the pools? The pools are not filled to the top like a swimming pool. These buildings would have to literally slam at an accelerated rate to lose any water. And they would suffer irreparable damage too. The fuel pools would likely crack wide open, the water would drain, and it would burn immediately. It might look intact, it might look like Reactor 2, but we know that's Ganchana syndrome deep into the earth, that it burned constantly for days. Kishida is expected to say, they're reading people's minds now. That's pretty decent, isn't it? I will be responsible for the restoration of Noto region and for the return of the victims. They got 24,000 homes outside the prefecture. Now they admit there's around 35,000 homes destroyed. For weeks they said, they moved past the 4,500 of the 5,000 homes in Suzu being destroyed. After 2 days, refused to acknowledge that anymore. A week later, they come out and said, well, Ishikawa has around, below Shika, had around 1,400 homes destroyed. And that was the only words we heard for the next week. Now, a few days back, we started hearing 20,000 homes were destroyed. Now we hear 35,000 homes. 1,400 landslides. 1,400 aftershocks. Now they have snowstorms on their shoulders that are going to compromise the integrity of anything that's left standing. The only thing we know about nuclear industry is they're evil, despicable scum. There's no mistake in that. They're just scumbags. We can't have a future and this species of animals known as the pro-nuclear on our planet. Donations for the quake-hit communities exceeded 10 billion yen. 10 billion, which is 90 million Canadian, 67 million American. Which, trust me, is nothing compared to the damage, but it's bless the people's hearts that tried. Japan to battle false information as part of a disaster measurement. The government eyes the use of originator profile technology. That's quite scary, actually. They're going to use artificial intelligence to determine that if you're not from their circle, then you're to be excluded. The originator profile technology is nobody's friend. So that the operators of the social media platforms can identify misinformation. So if you're not from the mainstream goblin medias, the scum of the earth, then you won't get any presence, any prominence. Evacuees are anxious as the heavy snow hits the quake-damaged central Japan prefecture. So they're expecting anywhere up to 80 centimeters of snow on buildings that are already crumbled. This one lady said, every time it snows, my home collapses and the warehouse seems to crumble even more. The execution of an anti-government protester caused a revulsion, not a revolution, but revulsion, I think is the right word, in Iran. Iran's insane, right? Iran's actually, they're insane. I remember a long time ago, just bear with me, I covered a story. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, we'll make you lucky here. Oh, could that be it? Oh, yeah, that's it. So this is probably one of the most amazing sacrifices I've seen a person make for... What you're going to see is you're going to see police descend upon protesters. In particular, there's going to be this girl known as the Blue Bra Girl. And they're going to... You can imagine what that place is like when it comes to women, right? They're going to descend on her and they're going to beat the daylights out of her. But a guy decides to sacrifice himself to save her, which I'm assuming is her loved one or her family member. And he knows what's going to happen to him. You're going to see it yourself. In one way, it's very difficult for me to watch it again. I done a video about it and covered it in great detail. But I think you should watch it to see how lucky you are if you're in Canada, United States. Let me do that again. Let me do it again. You're going to see he stayed there so they would beat him instead of her. They still beat her. She's to the left. They're stomping on her head and everything. He wouldn't leave her side, and he took the beating on purpose. Look at these savages. She's not fighting back. She's unconscious. That's the police. That's what happens when you don't have... When you don't have... We don't do that, right? That's considered acceptable. But we don't do stuff like that. But the nuclear industry, that's what it does to you every second of every day and to your loved ones and your children. That's what they're doing to you. They're destroying you, but they're too cowardly to do it that way. I think the person that stood there and took the beating, the original beating, because the girl would have got it. If they had let the girl go and ran, they would have just, literally, they would have killed her right on the spot. She survived, apparently. Execution of anti-government protester caused a revolution. A lot of these revolutions are pumped by the administrations of America and United Kingdom. Heavy snow may complicate relief in central Japan quake-hit area. Heavy snow. Up to 80 centimeters in a 24-hour period through Wednesday afternoon through today. There's 155 earthquakes in just one day. I guess that was yesterday or something in Japan. Look at all the media coming out to pump the drone. Toronto Star, the Independent United Kingdom. All of them out to pump this fake story about Fukushima. So they got an enormous amount of influence, enormous amount of power. They got all the media and the universities that will come out and lie on the drop of a hat. And we've covered it endless times. We've covered it so many times that I can barely keep my mind, or get my mind wrapped around this incredible hubris. UK flagship nuclear plant could cost 59 billion. Like, let's be realistic. They're not going to finish it in the next decade. So add another 20 billion or more onto that number. I'm right. What does cold weather do for radiation? Does the cold help radiation in the environment? It doesn't seem to matter. Cold or hot, I don't think there's any difference. Don't quote me. I don't know everything. But as far as I know, it doesn't matter if it's cold or hot. If it's cold, what happens with radioactive fallout is it builds up on the surface. And so after Fukushima, later that summer, when the Arctic, the Alaska ice was melting and stuff like that, they had a major pulse event because you had all this radioactive massive plumes, this pulse event landing on the ice floes, right? So in the summer, a few months later, when the Alaska started opening up from the ice pack, they were finding all kinds of sea life that was hanging out on, like seals and sea lions and elephant seals and stuff like this, walruses and birds, penguins and stuff like this. They were finding huge mass mortality events and incredible skin diseases because this stuff got worked into their fur, right? And so when that finally melted and that stuff sank to the ocean floor, you had a pulse event. And this was probably one of the catalysts of the die-off we see 10 years later, 12 years later, of the crabs. Because you had it all showing up at the one time. And then that slowly, now the crabs will start getting sterilized in increments and generationally over a decade or so, then they stop reproducing. And that's what we're seeing going on now with many species that are bottom dwellers, because it takes many generations. Like, so humans, we don't have the generations as quick as crabs do, or insects, for instance, and stuff like that. It's a great question, by the way. And apologize if I don't get everybody's question, because I kind of get lost in the technical stuff a lot. And it's like tonight, I'm going through a lot of extra details that because I've been cold all day. Man, it's cold today. Holy smokeroo. A major nuclear plant that Britain's government hopes will generate affordable. It's $59 billion, and price can only go up. It has to go up. There's no way that it's going to level out. If you know anything about nuclear, you know that every second year, during construction, they're going to need another 15 to 20% of the original price, right? Oh, I forgot about this and forgot about that. Low carbon energy. How can you call nuclear low carbon? It's something I'll never comprehend or understand. Achieve net zero, low carbon, net zero. These are all papers written by 4 people, right? Decarbonize, climate change, global warming. So global climate change was Brock Wallace. Global warming was James Hansen. Carbon footprint was BP oil campaign. And net zero was Miles Allen paper. Basically, all 4 of them produced a paper that was picked up by the degenerate UN and weaponized against humanity and the 8 million species effectively. Some experts say nuclear energy will be needed to help the nations. Some experts say nuclear is evil. How about that? Piece of shit that does stuff like this. If you're not going to give us a name, shut your mouth, you scumbag journalist. Oh, Prodigy And Westinghouse are targeting the launch of the eVinci floating nuclear plant in Canada by 2030. We hear all kinds of promises. 99% of the times they're broken promises, right? The eVinci micro-reactor, which doesn't have an application into the regulatory agency, they don't have a design in to the regulatory agency. Clean, and they call themselves Prodigy Clean Energy. It's like ultra-safe nuclear, right? There is no such thing as a clean energy nuclear or clean nuclear. There's no such thing as an ultra-safe nuclear. All of it's going to be hemorrhaging anthropogenic radiation into the environment forever. Aiming to deliver a first project in Canada by 2030. Canada is pro-nuclear as it gets, by the way. So they're talking about barges with nuclear power plants, small nuclear power plants on it, and then they can park that in a artificial harbour they'll build specifically for it. And it's going to protect it, right? From everything but the big storms, which we get massive amounts of post-Fukushima. So if they get a big hurricane, typhoon, or cyclone come in there, that's going to destroy it. It's only about stealing the investors' money. It's got nothing to do with reality. The International Atomic Energy Agency defined what the hell is it? I can't remember that acronym is for again now. The TNPP, wait now. It's floating nuclear power plants, but there's another part that I'm missing. I might have it here coming up actually. As a factory manufactured movable nuclear power plant, a movable nuclear power plant. And they always got these conceptual layouts of an installed Prodigy microreactor power station. Well, first off, if you build it, it's got to go through the whole licensing phase. So now you finally get an application through 10 years later. And if it gets approved, now you got to build an experimental one. You got to get all the kinks out of it. You got to redesign it. Then you got to eventually build a new one. It's an enormous amount of money, time, energy, efforts. I can't possibly comprehend how they're going to pull it off in the next 6 years. It's the same scam we heard NewScale, right? The exact same scam is what we're hearing. It's the exact same, the 100% unequivocal exact same scam. By selecting small modular reactors with proven safety. They don't exist and there is no proven safety. Right? This is the same narrative we heard with NewScale and TerraPower and ultra-safe nuclear and the rest of these despicable scum. It's the same thing. There is no proven, like how can you quantify the assertion that it has proven safety when it actually doesn't even exist? It's a fiction of their imagination. It doesn't exist. It's not even application to the regulatory agency that we can look at that are safe, robust, and economical. Well, you can't deliver something. That's what Sizewell just said. It'll be safe, economical, and robust. It doesn't exist. Right? You know, like Rolls-Royce is going to build a small modular reactors, and they got all kinds of money from the government. But their small modular reactors are over half the size of a large reactor. They got nothing to do with the so-called small modular reactor definition whatsoever. They just seen a chance to steal $500 million from the taxpayers, and they jumped on it and called it a small modular reactor. But it's the same design as the large reactors, only half the size. And it's not applicable for the application. They can't build it in a factory and put it on a truck and plug and play, right? Oh, it's a plug and play. Again, it's like the fusion reactors. It doesn't exist. It's not going to exist. Because, these reactors that they're talking about are so small, why wouldn't you use geothermal? It'll be at least half the price. And it'll be ready in a year instead of 10 or 15 or 20 or 25 years. So why not use geothermal? No toxicity, no nonsense. It's available right now. It's obsolete technology. Everything is off the shelf. You don't have to wait for any regulatory agencies. Canada has also offers strong government support. Yeah, and they offer government offers. The Canadian government is so evil when it comes to nuclear. It's hard to wrap your mind around unless you're like me, where you're from Canada and you see with your own two eyes. But they completely own all the media and all the universities here in the country, all of them, bar nothing. And they're using the International Atomic Energy Agency's safety and security framework as a benchmark. But the International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulatory agency. It doesn't have the authority to compel any country, and it doesn't have sovereignty over any country. So it's not a regulatory agency. Canadian project to develop marine-based nuclear reactor moves ahead. Again, this is just posturing to get investors to throw money at it to try to get it. So like, why are we talking about it when it doesn't exist? Because that's what when we see that, you should be terrified, because this is what we see with the fusion reactor scam, right? We see it coming from every direction. France and India discuss accord on small nuclear reactors. Lately, there is a lot of posturing about these small modular reactors. None of them have applications into the regulatory agency, except for NuScale had half an application in, and they just went belly up and fired 100 people. And there's zero possibility you're going to see them building their first reactor. It's zero. It was 100% of a scam, right? They took $4 billion from the American taxpayers, and we don't know how much they got from the investors. Why were they allowed? On the stock exchange when they don't even have a product? India is aiming to cooperate with France in the development of small modular reactors. Look, France doesn't have small. India doesn't have small modular reactors. Anything a small modular reactor can do, a geothermal power plant can do 100,000 times better and quicker. And you don't have to dig a deep geological repository for $28 billion to store it later. Nuclear power output expected to break the global records in 2025. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's so absurd. Now, you know why that story showed up, right? They were trying to save face, right? But nuclear is literally, like, in 2023, there was 507 gigawatts of renewables came online, which is equal to 620 or so large nuclear power plants in 12 months. Nuclear lost 2 nuclear power plants in 2023. So they had nothing coming online to add to their current capacity of 365 gigawatts. So there's 365 gigawatts over 80 years of nuclear online currently, if you can believe the nuclear industry, which I wouldn't believe. But there was 507 gigawatts of renewables came online just 12 months. And then the year before was 330 gigawatts, which is 1,000 gigawatts, which is twice, in 24 months, there was twice the capacity of all nuclear power plants worldwide combined came online in renewables in just 24 months. Nuclear can't build a reactor in less than 15 years. Then it takes them another 4, 5, 6 years to get the kinks out of it. And what they do is they destroy your ability to have a future by putting your eggs in that particular basket that shouldn't exist. It shouldn't exist. And it's lethal to everything with replicating cells because it's hemorrhaging radiation constantly all the time. So to suggest that there's going to be breaking global records next year, where's the evidence? How come they don't back it up with some evidence in the story, see? Ontario First Nation calls on federal government to intervene in nuclear waste project, which is the Chalk River National Laboratory, which is run by Jacobs and Floor, which are 2 dinosaurs of the industry, by the way, from the Manhattan Project. And their legacy is just hideous. And they're calling on the federal government to step in for the natives. Normally the natives are the victims. That's not an accident. Now that they're going ahead with the Chalk River, there's no turning that clock back. And that's right alongside one of the biggest aquifers in the North American continent. Chalk River is right alongside the Ottawa River. This flows straight down, also ends up right down in the Atlantic. And they're going to put it on that hillside. They're just going to put a cap over it. And this is hilarious. They're going to have, they said, 1 million tons. Chalk River National Laboratory says the mount will hold 1 million cubic meters of low-level radioactive MOPS. So, like, what are you talking about? Like, try adding up how many MOPS is... Like, first off, you can't clean up nuclear waste with a mop. All you can do is spread the radiation all over the fucking place. And the protective clothing they're talking about is paper suits, which TEPCO in Japan claims they burned 7,000 paper suits a day. And if you looked at the documentation of TEPCO of Fukushima with me, you'll know for a fact that there's not 7,000 people on that site in a year, let alone in a day. Here's the carbon-free plant. It's the biggest, most resource-intensive construction site in human history. And they're calling that carbon-free, and they're calling it too cheap to meter and green and everything else. Japan's nuclear revival is shaken but not stirred. Like, what are they talking about? It's not just shaken, it's violently stirred. True liquefaction, right? The major earthquake with 1,400 aftershocks and 1,400 landslides, and one community with over 4,500 or 5,000 buildings completely destroyed from January 1st, has little immediate impact in Japan's nuclear power sector. If it was illegal to be a monster, these people wouldn't be able to exist, would they? EDF, which is France, because United Kingdom can't build their own reactors. And France can't really either when you look at it. EDF's UK Hinkley nuclear cost balloon as the plant delayed anew. They expect another 10 billion pounds sterlings. 10 billion? Like another 10 billion? But you need another 10 billion on a site like that. Like, the whole story is insane. They need another 10 billion to finish it because they stole 90% of the money goes to administrations. So they start the site and then they steal all the money. So, well, we haven't got enough money. We need more money. Every 2 years, it's like, we need more money. We're nuclear. Might as well give it to us. We're going to get it. We are. We're nuclear. I ain't going to touch that one tonight. Another nuclear power plant gets a license to store Westinghouse's nuclear fuel. Look at this nuclear power plant here. This is in... where the hell is this? Bulgaria. So they show you that picture. But you can see the farms in the background, can't you? Look at the farms everywhere. What's up with all these farms? Why do you need so many... what? If we got rid of all the farms, you couldn't build any more nuclear power plants, basically, right? They only build them there so they can poison you because they're hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools 24 hours a day. We're seeing a movement towards nuclear energy in Canada. Lightbridge CEO. We're seeing a movement. Huh? What's that in the distance? My goodness. I think that's a movement toward... They're moving towards nuclear. Look at that. Call the press. Oh my God, they're moving toward... Achieve its net zero, which is a paper Miles Allen wrote. If I ever see Miles Allen, I'm going to kick the fucking shit out of him. North Korea appears to demolish reunification arches. Which is South Korea's, has no intentions. South Korea is doing every year. Them and Americans and other countries will get together and they'll go over and do nuclear runs on the border with North Korea. So for 50 years, North Korea was occupied by Japan. Then Hiroshima and Nagasaki happens. And so now North Korea is like, well, we need to fight for our freedom now that we're no longer occupied by Japan for the last 50 years. And so Korea was holding them back and ostracizing them and denying them any freedom. And so they couldn't handle North Korea because North Korea wanted freedom. They were going to fight for it. And so United Nations, which was then at that time called the League of Nations, changed its name to United Nations. Which is 195 militaries. United Military Industrial Complex is more like it. And so they went and dropped more ordnance, more weapons than the entire World War II war combined on this little tiny speck of land called North Korea. And they name-palmed every community. So they were targeting the women and the children. Destroyed the country. Now it's been ostracized, land, sea, and air embargoes for 70 years. A cycle of terror against you, see? We got to do it. North Korea's going to get you. They want freedom, Dana. I can't have freedom. They're not like me or you. They don't love their children. If you love your children, you'll get rid of nuclear. I'll tell you that much. Navy trains the first class of Australian nuclear submariners to operate nuclear reactors. Man, that is some stupid looking shit right there. Look at these clowns. These are actual clowns. Look at them. These are actual morons. What? They look like me or you, but these are actually morons. They're going to, for their attack submarines, Royal Australian Navy Lieutenant Commander. You only got you got a 6-month course, and now you're a lieutenant commander, are you? After 6 months. It's pretty good. Only nuclear does shit like that. He said operating a nuclear reactor was thrilling. What are you, a fucking child or something? The Australian Navy's future fleet of attack submarines. Australia with attack submarines. That's literally the stupidest thing I've heard in a long time. Australia with attack submarines. You know you lost your planet, man. NASA invested in new nuclear rockets concept for the future of space exploration. NASA gave us James Hansen, so that's enough reason to hate NASA for at least 1,000 years right there. Garden Brothers Nuclear Circus. Nuclear Circus. Garden Brothers Nuclear Circus. Fusion boost from liquid shield brings near unlimited clean energy closer. Well, first off, there is no fusion. Fusion can't exist because, like the sun exists because it can expel the energy 1 billion miles into space, right? Fusion boosts from liquid shields bring near unlimited clean energy closer. Unlimited clean energy from fusion. Clean energy. The British are fucking disgusting parasites, aren't they? The British nuclear industry. They're actually parasites is the only way you can describe them. They're not even a subhuman species, the British nuclear. And the Australians, of course, are the same thing. So they get temperatures of 270 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. See, the reason that it works on the sun is because the sun can throw excess out into space. We can't do that on Earth. And you're going to need to do it. So when you finally achieve fusion and you can't expel that excess energy like happens with the sun, you're going to blow up a continent. And they always give you these stupid impressions, artist impressions of nuclear. Let me see what we got here. Bear with me. Let me bring up the poll here. Let me bring up the poll. We got, should nuclear power scientists be on trial for crimes against humanity after destroying the biosphere? We have 48 votes. Somebody accidentally voted no, I guess, but that happens. And that's the show tonight for everybody. I'm exhausted. Another long, hard, brutal day. Another long, hard, brutal day. But we got great stories again tonight. Just, again, we see how evil this friggin' industry actually is. Thanks, so, Patrick. We do. I can get the poll to quit. Good night, everybody. Port Angeles. Everybody, Albert. Robert. I friggin' can't get I'm gonna have to reinstall that browser tonight. And hopefully that works better tomorrow. Blue Jay, Gabriel, hi everybody. Hugs for everybody. I screwed up, did I? Something in the water. No, Dana Nasana's out there. No, James Lucid is out there. Hi to everybody. Stephen Young is out there. Colette will be out there. Richard, Albert. Everybody else that I don't shout out, my apologies. Hugs for everybody. Yeah, I'm having such a hard time with that browser. It don't matter. We pulled off another show. That's all that matters. One more hope for the planet to have a future as I see it. Every time you get at one of these presentations, a lot of work today for some reason. I think it's just all that cold, right? It's supposed to warm up a little bit tomorrow. It's supposed to be minus 18 tomorrow. That's definitely better than today. Yeah, good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. I'll catch everybody on tomorrow night's show. And we'll see everybody then. Take care, folks.